Hey everybody, welcome into another edition of Sal's House. You might recognize the background here from It's Always Game Day in Buffalo, the other podcast that I do with Matt Bove. Just some logistical things that I had to get through on this one. So you know what? Just had to kind of change things up. Just wanted to make sure that we had good audio and video for you today because I have a special guest that's going to join me. I've talked to this guy on the radio, met him a couple of times in person, but this is the week to talk to Chad DeDominicis, who's going to join us here in a minute. And he's going to join us. First of all, before we get to Chad, though, always want to thank our tremendous sponsor, Sports City Pizza Pub, 1407 Niagara Street in Buffalo. They have great wings, great beer, great pizza. I mean, they have an outside patio. The weather's turning great, and we're going to see Chad outside in a minute. You'll see just how great it's going to be. And there's even got some really cool things happening. Watch party going on for the NCAA basketball tournament. I'm going to be a part of that. It's part of the American Cancer Society to help raise money. So we'll tell you all about that. But thanks a lot to Sports City Pizza Pub, 1407 Niagara Street in Buffalo. Right now, I'm going to welcome in my special guest, Chad DeDominicis, here on Sal's House. Chad, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you coming on board today. And man, it is so nice that you're outside doing this.
Yeah, it's nice. I wanted to take advantage of it. So I'm hoping the sun doesn't go over my shoulder here. It's blocked by a cloud, but I think we'll be good while we go.
I think you're good. You actually have a night. You don't have a glare. I have a glare. I had to put something over my. I'm not usually recording at this time of day, so I actually had to cover the window here, where I am. But Chad, you know, you've done a really great job of kind of giving people a different perspective on the Sabres and on hockey. And I would call you. And you could tell me if I'm wrong. I would call you like the analytics guy, like when I talk about hockey. But I don't know if that's how you want to phrase yourself. Like, where do you find your space in all of this? Talking about the team, covering hockey, social media, the information you provide?
Yeah, I think maybe a couple of years ago, being the analytics guy would have made sense. But now that it's so prevalent, I think that everybody kind of is just into it, right? So there's really no guy anymore. It's just, I mean, I guess I still can be because that's really what the focus is. But regardless, yeah, I think it's an opportunity that I saw, open up in terms of covering the team, when I started this 7-8 years ago. To differentiate myself, and then kind of always just been a numbers guy, right? That's always, it's been my thing that I've just weirdly been glued to, even in my my personal job that I have. I'm a big numbers guy, so I think that's what pulled me into hockey, and then I kind of just grew from there. And the fun thing with hockey is that when I got in, it was so new, right? So it's always growing, it's always changing, and we're even at the point now. I think we're at that next step of we have a lot of the information, we have a lot of that baseline public model stuff that you have now, and now we're kind of in the spot of, okay, what's the next thing? What's the next data point that's going to jump out? And maybe it's going to be player tracking. The NHL is starting to release that slowly here, looking at shot speed and player skating. So I'm curious if they start to release more stuff publicly, because I think that could really help the public models. I think close that gap between what we see publicly and then what teams have in a private sense.
Tell me about you. You just talked about, getting into that in your personal life numbers. Like, how was this the entry point for you to cover hockey? And, how did you find your path to doing it this way?
It's a weird story. I mean, I've always been into hockey, right? I played hockey a lot of my, the majority of my life. So hockey has always kind of been a thing that I've been into. So I think that's where it started. And really, I think it just kind of started, and we would do like playoff things with our friends in like a Facebook group. And I always everyone had these short little things, and I'd have this huge long thing that I would put together. And everyone's like, you kind of get really into it. Maybe you should look into it. Sure. But, it started with like a small, I don't remember what it was called, like a small little blog thing. And then it went to the next spot and the next spot and the next spot to where I am now. So I think it was more just kind of where I've gotten myself now. To being where I am. It definitely, when I started this, I did not think that I'd have my own website and I'd be covering the team and doing all this data stuff. It kind of just evolved to that spot.
Expected Buffalo is the place to find it. Now, is that where people would generally go if they just want to find all of the information that you do? You can go to your Twitter feed, and we put that out there a little while ago on social media at CMD But Expected Buffalo, tell us a little bit about that and what you can find there.
Yeah, so that is the site. So that's my own site now. So it actually will turn, which is crazy. It'll turn 4 years old next month. So it's crazy. It's been 4 years already. We started it during the pandemic. I was one of the people that my company closed in the pandemic, so I kind of had some time to fill, and decided to go that route and do that to fill some time. It's actually a funny story. Whenever someone asks, I have to tell it because Anthony, I think, deserves more credit in Expected Buffalo being a thing than it actually is. So Anthony Chandra, for those who don't know, another writer, basically my number 2 man on the site. At the time, he was pushing me to do it, and I started looking into it, started doing it, and I said to him, like, I just don't think it's going to work, man. I think there's so much that has to go into it, and it's a lot more than I thought. And his response, I still remember to this day, was like, no, we're going to do it. So I was like, oh, okay, I guess we're going to do it. So we pushed through. We got, a lot of it was self-taught, setting up the website, a lot of work. But yeah, we got to where we are now. And so I've always given him the full credit that Expected Buffalo exists, because really, if it wasn't for him, it probably wouldn't.
So I know that, sometimes, and we don't need to, get into the full details, but there are people in the media, obviously, who kind of push back against you. And you've seen that. And it's kind of devolved into, quite frankly, down the rabbit hole a little bit where you don't necessarily even have to get into that. But I am wondering, just as a whole, how that's changed for you. How does the media embrace you? Even on my end, like, I would say when I started at WGR as a talk show host, I don't think I'd have people who do what you do necessarily on, but now it's like, yeah, we got to get Chad on. Have you been on our radio station? And just maybe the acceptance and how that's all changed for you, and maybe how you're still fighting it.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more openness to it, and I'm greatly appreciative to what WGR has done, for me. I mean, they gave me that next step, if you will, to kind of be out there more, besides just social media and getting there, to get it to a bigger crowd and be on the radio, and then other people give me that opportunity off of that. So I'm ever indebted to that radio station for what they did and giving me that opportunity. But in terms of that, I mean, there's always going to be that pushback, right? I mean, you see it in hockey, I get it because it's so new, but even in baseball, where there's just really no denying that the numbers are the numbers. And they mean something, and they tell you things. There's even still pushback in that. So I think there's always going to be pushback within, the analytics community, because it's just different. It's how people who grew up watching the game never thought of that. So it's a different approach. It's a different thought process. It's a different way to kind of, in a sense, go against some things, where a lot of, your standard goals, assists, points, while they're so important, don't mean as much to somebody like me who looks at the stuff, because there's guys that have 10 goals in a season that somebody will say to me, who cares, they have 10 goals. I'm like, yeah, but look what this tells you they do. They may not have 10 goals, but look how much offense they drive, look how impactful they are defensively. And that's important. It's all not about just scoring and points. While that's what wins games at the end of the day, it's all the little things that go into that. So yeah, I mean, there's always going to be pushback. I think as I've gone through this, I've also taught myself to mature more with it. There's little things I think I would let bother me initially, where now it's just whatever, or you just have fun with it. We're just talking about sports here. We're not making life decisions. We're not impacting people's lives. We're not saving lives. At the end of the day, it's just fun. It's just entertainment. So I think I've changed my view in that regard over the last few years, where it really just, it doesn't bother me anymore, that pushback that I do get.
I love that. And I've kind of gone down the same road a little bit myself, right? I mean, you're never going to please everybody, and there's going to be people who do that pushback, and it's you have control over that, right? You have control over how you let that impact your day-to-day life, how you react to it. And you can just choose to say, that's okay. And if I'm not for you, I'm not for you. And I've kind of had to do the same thing. One of the things that I'm always fascinated by is the amount of data that you're able to have at your fingertips, because as a beat reporter for the NFL, I dig into some of the numbers, not as quite as far as an Aaron Schatz or Mike Tanier or people like that, or people like yourself. But but if I want to, it's pretty available to me. What you do, maybe it's just my ignorance about hockey, but it seems like you do a lot of things that aren't readily available. Like, how tough is that to get a lot of the information that you want to push out there? And even on a day-to-day basis, a game-to-game basis. I mean, literally at the end of the night, you're like, here's the expected 5-on-5. I'm like, how does he do this right away?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's different things. That part of it is I have spreadsheets set up in the background. So what I just do is download the data from Natural Stat Trick most of the time, because that's the easiest place, and it's free, and it's all that. It's publicly available to you, but you can just go get it if they wanted to. But it's easy, just drop it into spreadsheets that are set up. I have all the math and everything behind it where I want stuff to load in. And then that data flows into a Tableau sheet where I just open Tableau, and then I have to make a few minor tweaks, and boom, it's ready to go within 5 minutes. And I'm downloading the data as the game is going on too. So a lot of it, the new stuff is that I've added in is period by period data. So I download the data after every period. So it's really all in there already. So it's an easy thing to just throw together at the end of the game to make it pretty quick and get it out there, efficiently in enough time. People are still talking about the game. In terms of looking up the numbers themselves, I think because I've been doing it so long, it might be a sad part of it too, is I know kind of, Evolving Hockey Site, Micah Site, Hockey Viz, Natural Stat Trick, all those public models. I know where certain things are that I want to go get.
Sure.
So if there's something in particular I want to look at a certain player, I know how to go. I know right where to go to get it. And even something I've kind of taught myself over the last few years, like if you go to Evolving Hockey Site, it's not like out there as terms like a chart, but what you can do is they have the NHL play-by-play data right there. So you can go to it, you have to find it, you can go to it, pull it out, and then kind of that's just the raw data they use to build their information. You can do what you want to look into things that you want using that raw data. So I started to do that more to look into some certain things, from a game-to-game basis or a player basis in terms of just individual things I want to look at. It's a lot when you pull it down because it is literally every single thing that happens on the ice. And that's why I think it's it's frustrating when people say, get back to the conversation, these numbers, how do you watch what's on the ice or how does that impact on the ice? Well, like this data is built from literally every single sequence that occurs on the ice. Every single thing, guys going shifts going on and off in a shot, a block of every single thing is tracked, in the play-by-play data. So it's really intricate and also it can be overwhelming if you don't know how to use that type of data. But it's, again, for people like me, it's fun and interesting to kind of dig through and pull some more in-depth things out of that.
We're going to get into the Sabres here in just a moment. It is the trade deadline week, so that's a big reason why I wanted to get Chad on to explain how it all works, to get into his story a little bit, and also the Sabres themselves. But, of course, you can follow him on social media at CMD DeDominicis, and I'm going to throw up the Expected Buffalo site there as well for everybody right there. You can go there, check it out. Got a lot of great stuff. Want to thank you for joining us here in Sal's house. Want to thank Sports City Pizza Pub, 1407 Niagara Street in Buffalo. Before we get into the nitty gritty of the Buffalo Sabres, so I just got back from the NFL Combine, and of course they, you have all these metrics and numbers and 40 time and all those things that you're doing. It's all numbers, right? You said you're a numbers guy. Then they have like the meetings and the formal meetings and the interviews, and we hear about how much that matters. Like, how much space is there for you when you're analyzing a team, when you're analyzing a player, the old Guttalytics or, the culture fit, and like how much of that matters to you when you're thinking about what's good or what's bad with a player or a team?
Yeah, I think that's important. And I think that can all tie into it too, because really all the data and analytics it's just information to help you make a decision. Okay. That's the way it is. So it's just part of the input in terms of stuff you bring. So you take that information, that input, and then you can see something about a particular player and you can ask that player about it and see if there's a fit or if there's a reason why they think there are certain things that are happening that way. And even, from a football thing, I think, watching video and film is still an important thing too. One of the things we've tried doing more, and I've talked with Anthony about it, is using more video in what we do to show people this is the data we're talking about, and here's the example of how that data is occurring in real time in this video, and you're seeing it, and then using that to marry up your thoughts. So I think it's just an input to data, but really all of the inputs that you get from a data standpoint, from a scouting standpoint, is all very important. And I don't think either one is more important than the other, because you want to get as much data as you can to make the right decision, especially when your job relies on it. And a lot of these general managers and coaches, you want to have all the information at your fingertips. So, it's very important.
All right, let's start big and go down. We'll start at the top. We'll go down to the bottom. We'll start with Kevin Adams.
Okay.
Chad DeDominicis, do you think Kevin Adams has constructed a Buffalo Sabres roster the right way based on the data and the skill set of the players he's put together?
Constructed the roster the right way. I'm trying not to cop out here and say yes and no, but that's kind of where I'm leaning. Okay. I think yes, in the sense that I think he's built the young group properly. Up to where they are, given them that responsibility, relied upon them. I think this season we're seeing the result of relying on that a little bit too much. I think last offseason was the opportunity to build around that group, and he really didn't. And now around the league itself, and I understand there's a lot of movement, and that's understandable to an extent. But I think what he's done maybe to surround his core, I think is where the issue is. And I think that's the next step for him. I think he has to be able to do that this summer. He's going to get another opportunity, and it's kind of crazy. He's going to be in literally the same spot. Besides, he might have a goaltender now, so that's one less thing he'll have to go chase. But he still needs all of those same things he needed last summer. So really, I think that's where I'm at now. You've done a good job drafting. You've done a good job putting together a front office, in my opinion. You've done a good job putting together a new core of where you are. Now it's just supplementing that. It's finding that next piece of your team can take that next step. So it's not all on those core players. You have some other guys that if they're having a down like we're seeing now, that could step up and, keep the team afloat, if they will, until your key guys get going.
Okay, let's go to the coach now. Has Don Granado utilized the players for the most part correctly or incorrectly? How much is the blame as far as your data and how it marries to what the skill set of the players are?
Yeah, that's the interesting one. Granado is really on my focus here, the last 20 games of the season, because I think I'm leaning one way, but I'm not 100% there yet on him. So I think the same thing. It's kind of a yes and no type thing. I think up before this season, I think he was giving the right guys the opportunities, leaning on his younger guys and, all of that. And that all worked out. And there was some deployment things in there. But again, it's a young roster and you expect that. In year 3 here, we're seeing a lot of the same things repeat itself. I think he's having trouble making decisions in terms of how teams have reacted against him, how they've changed their approach against them, because, teams are aware of the Sabres and their offensive ability. And I think that's why you've seen the offense come back a little bit this year, because teams have adjusted to how they're playing the Sabres and they're taking away that rush offense. And I don't think Granado's had an answer to it. And to this point, he still really hasn't shown an answer to it. It's kind of more just banging your head against the wall and, you have a couple nice nights or you play a low event game, which I don't think this roster is filled out to be. And then, you have the lineup decisions within that at times are a little bit confusing and don't always work out. But there are some times where I think it doesn't work and it does work. So ultimately, I think I'm putting it all together that I'm not quite sure if he's the coach to lead them to where they need to go next. I think he's done a great job getting them to this point. But for me, as of right now, I don't think he's shown enough of that ability to change, to adapt to how other teams are playing against him. To have confidence that he can lead this team, to a playoffs where they haven't been in a super long time. So we'll see where the next, month or so goes here and what they do in the offseason. But I think there's definitely some concern starting to rise for me there.
I didn't even plan on asking you this until the last 24 hours, essentially, but the New Jersey Devils just fired Lindy Ruff. And I know you tweeted some stuff about Ruff and the job that he's done. So let's just play a hypothetical, because we know that there are a lot of fans who would love to see Lindy Ruff back in Buffalo. Let's say the Sabres do move on from Don Granado. Judging what you saw in New Jersey, is that the type of coach, anything that he's done that would fit in Buffalo for the type of players and the type of process and scheme he has?
Yeah, I wrote an article today I put out about it. When it all first happened, he was released. I really didn't want any part of it.
Right.
And then I started to kind of just look at the numbers and see, and then it was, okay, that's interesting. Okay, that's interesting. Okay. And it kind of built into, throughout his career, one thing that Ruff has done consistently is he's put together one of the top offensive teams in the league in terms of actual goals and generating offense. And it's interesting how it's sustained through his time with the Sabres before he was let go when scoring was up, to the Devils when scoring was down in the league, and then back to the Devils. The Stars when scoring was down, and then back to the Devils where scoring is back up in the league again. His offense sustained through all of those different periods, so it tells me that he has a system in place that can generate offense in this league. So that's one part of it. But then look into the defense part of it and the goaltending part of it, where he has some of the worst goaltending luck that I've seen out of coach out of the last few years. But there also has to be something in his system where it can't all just be bad luck. I think there's something in his defensive system that causes his teams to give up a lot of goals, and that's something that should be looked at too. So overall, I think maybe as a stopgap thing, if they wanted to, it could make some sense. But the thing I still have in my head is the nostalgia part of it. Like, I don't think we need to go back and relive that. I'd probably lean to try something different. But if they did do it, there is an argument to it, and I could see it, and I could understand it.
I said the same thing on the radio today, which is it's what we've done too much here. Marv Levy coming back, and Ted Nolan coming back, and Phil Housley coming back, and I don't want that to cloud my judgment if it would be an upgrade, but I just feel like it's the thing that we do here too much. You know what I mean?
Yep, 100%. Completely agree with that.
All right, so you mentioned goalie. You said now he has a goalie. I'm assuming you mean UPL, but do you mean Devin Levi? Where do you land on the goalie situation and the outlook going forward?
Yeah, goalies are, man. As a data guy, I mean, our thing as a data people are goalies are voodoo. Like they're hard to predict. It's insane.
Right.
And Anthony really did actually, I think it was the beginning of the year or maybe late summer, a really good article on goaltending and kind of how it just differentiates from season to season. There's really only like 3 or 4 guys that are consistently at the top of the league and consistently good, and the rest of that it's just up or down. So as of right now, Luukkonen has played excellent, and he looks like their number 1 goaltender moving into next season, and that's awesome. That's great, and I don't, and that's good for them and exciting. And then Levi on the other hand, I jumped up and down and wrote articles about it in the summer that it was a really bad idea what they were trying to do. It just does not work with a player whose age. And sure enough, it didn't work. And I think he's in the right spot now, and he's performing better in the right league, being in the AHL. So I think they have the basis, of 2 good goaltenders to move forward with. And I think Luukkonen's going to be a starter next year, and then they have to make a decision on what they do with Levi. It's that wild card of what do you do between it? Do you need to bring in a veteran backup, or are you just going to rely on Levi? But at 22 years old, is he ready for that still? You don't really know. You're taking kind of that gamble again. He's a little bit older, but he's still a young player. And is he ready to play 35 games? And if Luukkonen does, which is possible, does come back a little bit, and you just have Luukkonen and Levi, well, now you're in a bad spot again. So that'll be an interesting thing to follow, throughout the summer. But yeah, I think they have a good base in place right now. And Luukkonen just looks different. He's confident. He's reading the puck well. He's moving well. So that's why I have more confidence that I think he's going to sustain, maybe not, top 5 goaltender in the league and goal save above expected level. But I think he can be an above average goaltender for them. And that's kind of really what they need as long as their offense comes back.
Kevin Adams was on WGR earlier this week with Brian Koziol and Paul Hamilton, and he said flat out, unprompted, there were rumors that we were shopping Casey Middlestat. Nothing could be further from the truth. Now there's GM talk, and there's, I'm not going to say he's lying necessarily if he hasn't made calls. He said he would take calls, but I guess the question would be for you, A, do you know of anything different there? And B, would that be a good idea to shop Casey Middlestat?
No, I heard the same things before he said that. I saw the report that came out. I forgot where it was, but the same things is they are not shopping him. Teams are calling. They're answering phone calls as they should, and they're listening. And that's the right thing. That's the right thing to do with anybody. Anybody that calls, you never know. Maybe somebody will get silly on somebody to inspect a move, and you can't pass up on it. I think it makes sense on Middlestat to see what is out there. And make a decision off of that. I go back and forth on this. On one hand, I think it makes sense to keep him because really finding a center to replace him could be difficult. But at the same time, if there is an opportunity to make your team better in another area, whether it's defensively or another forward, you can't pass that opportunity up either. So where I think this will ultimately go is I think in the off season they find something, but right now, I don't think it's a move at the deadline, but I think in the offseason, there's a real possibility there, depending maybe where some contract discussions start early. But it's fun. Middlestat for a year for me has been really fascinating to see his ascension, and then to also realize they paid a lot of guys and he's not one of them. So are you going to commit to another guy? You can always go short term, but I'm fascinated how that's going to play out here.
Give me a player, Chad, that you're higher on than the fan base might be due to what you've researched and seen through your numbers. And then the opposite, a player maybe that you're not as high on than a lot of the fan base might be due to your research and numbers.
Higher on 100% is Peyton Krebs.
Okay.
I think he's getting right now he's getting a raw deal with how he's being treated and how he's being utilized. And I understand the raw goals, assists, points aren't there. But really, over the last 2 months, he's been one of their better forwards, in my opinion, when he's been given the opportunity. And even on that fourth line, he's generating offense with Girgensons and Robinson right now, and there's just not a lot of finishing ability there. So I think that's why we're not seeing the points come from him, because he's playing with guys that just don't have high finishing ability. And I think if he's given more of an opportunity to step up into a bigger role with more, players that have a better finishing sense, I think the points will grow with that. So he's definitely my under the radar guy. In terms of people who, guy who I think is overvalued.
Or maybe even you're a little disappointed in that you thought it would be better.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Man, I'm trying to. That's. I don't know, because
I mean, people are talking about Owen Power having a sophomore slump. Would he fall in this category?
Yeah, but I think he may fall in the Krebs category for me, though, as
Wow.
being, I think, underappreciated for what he really does in terms of how he drives offense and stuff like that. I think if I'm going to go to a guy that probably has been disappointing this year, and people might agree, but I'll go here, is I think Cousins.
Yeah.
I expected a lot more from him this season, and I understand there's some injuries there in the beginning of the year that kind of caused his slow start. And I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who's going to score 30 goals like he did last year. I don't think he's consistently going to be that guy. I think he's more in the 20 to 25 range. But I expected more playmaking out of him. I hoped for him to take a step defensively this year, and I don't think he really did as much as I hoped. A lot of this team itself, took steps defensively, but I don't think he really took that where I wanted it to go. Now, having said that, I still think Cousins is going to be fine moving forward and is still, a fine second line center.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think if he's the guy that I could say there's not as much injury situation with you. I understand you had the jaw injury for the Willard in the year, where Thompson is going through a hand and a leg, and Tuck I don't think Tuck's been healthy since training camp, and Skinner's going through stuff. He just got imaging a week ago. Those guys have more of an excuse for how they're playing, if you will, where I don't think Cousins carries that much. So it's good to see he's starting to get going now, but I think he's definitely my disappointment guy I would go to this season.
Yeah. And obviously with the contract that he got last year, that ramps that, situation
Right.
and, thought up a little bit more. All right. So the trade deadline is Friday this week. I'm going to start with what they need and then go to what you expect. So fill in the blank, Chad DeDominicis. The Sabres need, this is obviously probably going into next year. I think we both agree they're not going to make the playoffs this year. They might need to concentrate on getting over the hump next year, but the Sabres need a player who blank.
A player who can – okay, I'll do this way. A player who can get the team going. And what I mean by that is a player who can – this is a team that notoriously has slow starts or bad first periods. Mm-hmm. A player who can get the guys up and kind of going. Now, I'm not saying to go out and get somebody who just drives people through the wall. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying to go get a guy who can have a shift and lean on some people and run around and kind of agitate maybe, but at the same time can be an effective player and score goals, and can be a forechecker in tight games. Kind of like the best way to put it is a guy who's a little bit above Greenway. Okay. A little bit more offensive ability than Jordan Greenway brings you. So I think a guy similar out to Greenway but brings you a little bit more offense is kind of what I'm looking for. And then, I think another defenseman too is super important. They've been chasing that for 2 or 3 years now.
And you mean a real stay-at-home defenseman, a guy in the top four that can just really eat up minutes?
I think somebody you can kind of just roll along with Darlene. I mean, Yoki Haru has done it. I don't like Samuelson there. They do. I don't. Yep. And Yoki Haru, I think, has survived there for now. But I think just a guy who can just hang out with Darlene and be that defensive force with him.
Looking down, and I'll get to what you expect in a minute, but looking down what Rochester has and thinking about the guys who come up, I know you've done some work on some of these guys, and not even when they're just necessarily Buffalo, but Kulik, Isaac Rosine, Matt Savoy, obviously in juniors. How would they fit into this mix? Are you excited for that? Or do you think that these are guys that, if you need to part with them, that's fine because you need these other things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited for all three of them. I think they all have their upside to them. I think Kulik probably is the guy that I've I'm the highest on. I think he is the most likely to have a long NHL career. And then I think, but behind that is Rosie and Savoy. Maybe not in that order, but I think they're behind him. But at the same time, I don't think you make this team better next year, and all three of them are still in your prospect pool. I feel like you have to. I could see a scenario where one of Rosie or Savoy are moved in the offseason. I think they really like Kulik, so I don't see that unless somebody comes in with a crazy offer. But I think it's possible Rosie or Savoy are moved, especially with Benson coming in and stepping right into the NHL. He's essentially hopped Rosie and Savoy, and even Kulik to an extent. So yeah, I'm excited about all of them. They all have their own things, and they're different players too, which I think is interesting. But yeah, I think at least one of those guys probably goes this summer.
All right, that's a great segue into how we can wrap here and what you expect by Friday. There's been a lot of talk the Sabres wanting to make a hockey trade, a bigger hockey trade, that they're not afraid to mix things up, even though they're not necessarily in it. Are we looking at an active trade deadline day for Kevyn Adams? I mean, what do you think that could be out there, and how aggressive do you think he'll try to be and will be?
I think he's open to doing something similar to what Greenway was last year. That type of move. I think he's open to that if it's there. I don't know if it's going to be there for him this year, but he's looking for it. In terms of what I'm comfortable saying will happen, I think undoubtedly Erik Johnson has probably played his last game as a Sabre, so I think he will be moved. And then just something in my gut tells me, from the way the players are talking, from the way Adams is talking, from the way Oposo is talking, I think he's going to go too. And I have no issue with that. I think it's Kyle's time to go chase a championship. He's done enough for this team to get them where they are now. And I think it also makes sense to do that now, because then you hand the keys to the team over to Darlene and the other leadership group you're going to put around him, and it's his team now. He starts to establish that now and then can carry that into next season. So I think just from an organizational next step, and then just for Oposo's career where he is, that makes sense. And then Girgensons is kind of the wild card for me. I've always thought they weren't going to move both Oposo and Girgensons. It'd be one or the other. But at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes too. Same thing. He's put his entire career in Buffalo, and I would say it's probably unlikely he's back next season. So maybe they give him an opportunity to go chase something too. And then beyond that, I don't know. We'll see. The Sabres always kind of just pull that random guy out. That was Riley Stillman last year. It was like, whoa, where did that guy come from? So we could see that type of thing too.
Where does Oposo fit? There's been talk of the Rangers, maybe. Like, is there a certain fit for him that would be really nice for you to see? And you go, you know what? That's a nice landing spot for him.
Yeah, I think the Rangers are a good spot. I hope he doesn't go to the Rangers because I don't really want to root for the Rangers.
I said the same thing this week. I got you, buddy.
Yeah, I hope he goes west to one of our Western Conference team and has that opportunity. A team that really, it's unfortunate they're not in the playoffs, that I think they would have tried really hard to get him to is Minnesota, because that's where he's from. That's where he lives. I think that would have been a cool story to get him to the Wild, but that's just not going to happen because they're not really in the playoff mix. But yeah, I mean, if it's the Rangers, then it's the Rangers, and okay, I'll root for the Rangers for a couple months, and it is what it is. But I hope he goes out to a team out west and really has a good opportunity.
I love it. Chad, thank you. Once again, promote your stuff, man. Tell everybody where they can find you and your website and what they can expect.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm not gonna read my whole Twitter off. Salah shared that, so you can see it's a long Twitter name.
I'll put it on here. There you go. There you go.
So you can find me there, and then expectedbuffalo.com. That's where all of our content is. We're gonna be very busy this week, and then over the next few weeks, as this team tries to stay alive, and then we'll probably get into some prospect stuff leading up to draft, and then we'll get into our usual free agency profiles, trade stuff that we start to kick around, as the season comes to an end. And then we have our podcast too, Expected Buffalo, the podcast. It's been hard to put content together this year for that, but we're starting to get into it again. We just had an episode this past week, and then we'll obviously have, many more as the season starts to roll up here. But yeah, a lot of fun stuff in store, which we'll try to keep it fun for people as we go through here.
As I'm sure you will. The wheels on the bus go round and round. I mean, it's what happens every year here. It's the cycle of sports. Once again, thank you to Sports City Pizza Pub, 1407 Niagara Street in Buffalo. I'll be there for the watch party on March 21st behind the bar, raising money for the American Cancer Society. Hope you join us. Thanks to Mike Rizzo. And thank you very much, Chad. I really appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, thanks, Sal. I appreciate it.